The starship carrying Earth's delegation emerged from faster-than-light travel with a brilliant flash of blue light. Ambassador Jaiwan Park stood at the observation deck, watching the massive space station grow larger in the viewport. The Galactic Council station orbited Velthora Prime like a silver wheel, its gleaming spokes stretching for kilometers in every direction. Hundreds of alien ships dotted the space around it, representing dozens of civilizations from across the galaxy. Jaiwan adjusted her diplomatic uniform and took a deep breath. Behind her, Captain Miho Choi stood in his crisp military dress outfit, hands clasped behind his back. Dr. Hyojin Lee was reviewing data on her tablet, preparing final notes about the various alien species they would meet. This was humanity's first formal contact with the Galactic Council, and everything needed to be perfect. "It's beautiful," Hyojin said quietly, looking up from her work. "I never imagined we'd see something like this in our lifetime." Miho nodded but kept his eyes scanning the alien vessels around them. His job was security, and he noticed the heavy warships clustered near the station. Most belonged to the Velthoran Empire, the dominant military power in this region of space. Their ships were angular and aggressive, covered in weapon ports and armor plating. They looked like they were built for war, not exploration. "Ambassador, we're receiving docking instructions," the ship's pilot announced over the intercom. "Base 17, as assigned by station control." Jaiwan nodded. "Take us in, Captain Rivera." "Nice and smooth. Let's show them humans know how to make a good first impression." The ship glided through the docking sequence perfectly. As the airlocks connected and pressurized, Jaiwan gathered her team. There were 12 humans total in the delegation: diplomats, scientists, cultural attaches, and 3 military guards including Miho. Each person had been chosen carefully for their expertise and ability to represent humanity's best qualities. "Remember," Jaiwan told her team, "we're here to listen, learn, and build relationships. Earth has waited a long time to join the galactic community. We're the newcomers here, so we need to be respectful but confident. We have much to offer, and much to gain from cooperation." The airlock doors opened, revealing the station's interior. The docking bay was enormous, easily large enough to hold a dozen ships the size of Earth's vessel. The walls were made of some kind of translucent material that shifted between colors. Gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth normal, and the air had a faint metallic taste. A reception committee waited for them. At the front stood a Velthoran official, easily 3 meters tall with 4 arms and gray, rocky-looking skin. His eyes were deep red, and he wore elaborate robes that indicated high rank. Behind him were representatives from other species, the elegant luminari who seemed to glow with soft light, the insectoid crics with their chittering communication devices, and several others Jaiwan didn't immediately recognize. "Ambassador Park of Earth," the Velthoran said, his voice deep and resonant. "I am High Overseer Draxon Cal. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I welcome humanity to this station." Jaiwan stepped forward and bowed slightly, a gesture of respect she'd practiced. "High Overseer Cal, thank you for receiving us. Earth is honored to begin this dialogue with the galactic community." Draxon's face was difficult to read, but something in his tone seemed dismissive. "Yes, well. Your species has developed faster than light travel remarkably quickly. Some might say suspiciously quickly. But you are here now, and the Council will hear your petition for membership." The words were polite, but the implication was clear. The Velthorans were suspicious of humanity's rapid technological advancement. Jaiwan had expected this and maintained her diplomatic smile. The delegation was escorted through the station's corridors. The architecture was stunning, blending styles from hundreds of different civilizations. Markets and gathering spaces bustled with alien lifeforms conducting business, exchanging information, and socializing. Hyojin's eyes were wide with wonder, trying to absorb every detail. Miho, however, noticed the Velthoran guards positioned at every intersection. They were armed with weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Their eyes followed the human delegation with clear hostility. He didn't like it, but he kept his concerns to himself for now. The council chamber was a vast amphitheater with seating arranged in rising tiers. Representatives from 43 different species occupied the seats, with the Veltheran delegation holding the largest section. At the center was a speaking platform where Jaiwan would present humanity's case for joining the council. The session began with formal introductions. Each council member spoke briefly about their civilization and their role in the galactic community. Jaiwan listened carefully, noting the power dynamics. The Veltherans clearly dominated through military might. The Luminari seemed to be the voice of science and culture. Smaller civilizations appeared to align themselves with one faction or another for protection. When it was humanity's turn, Jaiwan approached the central platform. She carried no notes, speaking from her heart about Earth's journey from a single planet to a spacefaring civilization. She talked about humanity's art, music, literature, and scientific achievements. She emphasized Earth's desire for peaceful cooperation and mutual benefit. "We know we are young compared to your ancient civilizations," Jaiwan said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "But we believe that fresh perspectives can bring value. Earth offers friendship, trade, cultural exchange, and our unique human creativity. We ask only for the chance to prove ourselves as worthy members of this galactic community." Many council members seemed receptive. The Luminari delegation leader actually smiled, which Hyogen later confirmed was a positive sign for their species. But the Veltheran section remained cold and unmoved. After Jaiwan's presentation, High Overseer Draxon stood. "The Council has prepared a treaty for Earth to sign. It outlines the terms of your membership and your obligations to the Galactic Order." A holographic document appeared before Jaiwan. As she read through it, her diplomatic training kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt growing alarm. The treaty wasn't an agreement between equals. It was a submission document. Earth would be required to share all technology with the Council, specifically with Veltheran oversight. Earth's military would be limited to system defense only. Human colonies would require Council approval. Trade would be regulated entirely by Council appointees. In essence, Earth would become a vassal state of the Veltheran Empire. Jaiwan looked up at Draxon. "High Overseer, this treaty requires Earth to surrender its sovereignty. That's not acceptable. We came here as equals seeking partnership, not as subjects seeking masters." The chamber fell silent. Several alien species shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Draxon's red eyes narrowed, and, when he spoke, his voice carried an edge of anger. "You are newcomers to this galaxy, human. You have no concept of the threats that exist in the darkness between stars. The Council maintains order and peace through strength and unity. Your refusal to accept our protection is not just foolish. It is insulting." Miho stepped closer to Jaiwan, his hand moving unconsciously toward where his sidearm would normally be. The weapons weren't permitted in the Council chamber. Hyogen stood frozen, suddenly aware that this diplomatic mission was going very wrong. Jaiwan stood her ground. "Earth seeks friendship and cooperation, but we will not surrender our freedom. Perhaps we can negotiate different terms that respect both our sovereignty and the Council's security concerns." Draxon's four hands clenched into fists. "There will be no negotiation. Accept the treaty, or face the consequences of standing alone in a very dangerous galaxy." The threat was clear and unmistakable. Jaiwan realized that humanity had made a terrible miscalculation. They had assumed the Galactic Council would be like Earth's United Nations, a forum for cooperation between sovereign nations. Instead, they had walked into an empire that demanded submission. "Then, I'm afraid Earth must decline Council membership under these terms," Jaiwan said firmly. "We will return home and hope that in time, better relations can be established." She turned to leave, gesturing for her delegation to follow. But Veltheran guards blocked the exits, their weapons now openly displayed. Draxon's voice boomed through the chamber. "You dare refuse the Council and think you can simply leave? Your arrogance will be corrected, human." Jaiwan's blood ran cold as she realized they had walked into a trap. This had never been about diplomacy. It had been about dominance and submission from the very beginning. The Veltheran guards surrounded the human delegation with military precision.
Miho instinctively moved to protect Ambassador Park, but energy weapons hummed to life, aimed directly at the humans.
Resistance would mean immediate death for everyone. What is the meaning of this? Jaiwan demanded, trying to maintain her diplomatic composure even as fear threatened to overwhelm her. We came here under diplomatic protection. This is a violation of every civilized standard of conduct.
Draxon descended from the Veltheran section, his massive form casting a shadow over Jaiwan. Civilized standards are defined by the strong, not by upstart species who barely learned to leave their home system. You insulted this council with your refusal. Now you will face justice. From the Luminary section, a delegate stood up, their form shimmering with agitated light.
High Overseer, this is excessive. The humans have committed no crime.
They simply declined membership.
Let them return to their ship.
Other voices joined in protest, but they were quickly drowned out by the Veltheran faction and their allies. It became clear that while some council members opposed what was happening, they lacked the power or courage to intervene.
The human delegation was forcibly separated.
Miho, Hyojin, and the other team members were dragged toward a side chamber despite their struggles. Jaiwan was held in place by 4 Veltheran guards, their grip like stone crushing her arms.
Let them go, Jaiwan shouted. I'm the ambassador. Whatever grievance you have is with me, not them. Draxon smiled, an expression that looked predatory on his alien features. How noble.
But they will serve as witnesses to what happens when species defy the Council's will.
We want your testimony broadcast across your pathetic little planet. They need to understand their place in the galactic order. Over the next 3 hours, Jaiwan was subjected to a mock trial in the Council chamber.
Charges were fabricated: espionage, conspiracy against the Council, threats of military action, and a dozen other accusations that had no basis in reality. Veltheran prosecutors presented falsified evidence, including manipulated recordings of conversations Jaiwan had never had. She defended herself eloquently, pointing out every logical flaw and fabrication.
But the outcome was predetermined.
The Council voted along factional lines, with the Veltheran bloc and their client species forming a majority. The vote for guilt was 41-2, with only the Luminari and 1 other species voting for acquittal. In the detention chamber, Miho and Hyojin were forced to watch via holographic projection.
Miho's hands were clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white.
This is insane, he muttered.
It's a show trial. They're not even trying to hide it.
Hyojin was crying silently, her scientific mind struggling to process the brutal political reality they'd encountered.
We need to get a message to Earth.
They need to know what's happening here. But their communication devices had been confiscated. The humans were completely cut off from their ship and from home. Or so the Veltherans believed. What they didn't know was that Ambassador Park carried a neural implant, a piece of technology that Earth's intelligence services had insisted on for exactly this kind of scenario. The implant was broadcasting everything she saw and heard through quantum-entangled particles, sending data instantaneously back to Earth regardless of the distance or interference. Earth was watching.
And Earth was recording everything. Draxon announced the sentence, execution by atmospheric decompression.
It was a deliberately cruel method, chosen to maximize suffering and send the strongest possible message. The Veltheran Empire wanted the entire galaxy to see what happened to those who defied them.
Jaiwan was taken to an airlock chamber in the station's outer ring.
The chamber had transparent walls so the assembled council members and countless viewing species across the galaxy could watch.
Cameras broadcasted the event on every major communication channel.
She stood alone in the center of the chamber, still wearing her Earth diplomatic uniform. Her hands were bound behind her back. Through the transparent walls, she could see the cold stars beyond and the curve of Velthera Prime below.
Draxon's voice echoed through speakers.
Let this be a lesson to all species who think they can reject the Council's wisdom.
Arrogance has consequences. Defiance will not be tolerated. Jaiwan looked directly at the nearest camera.
She knew Earth was watching. She knew her family was probably watching. The thought nearly broke her, but she forced herself to remain composed. In her final moments, she would show the galaxy what humanity was made of. "My name is Ambassador Jaiwan Park," she said clearly. "I came here seeking peace and friendship for my people. I was offered slavery instead. I refused because freedom is more valuable than survival on our knees. If this is the price of standing up for human dignity, then I pay it willingly." She paused, then spoke words that would change galactic history. "To the people of Earth, they have shown us who they are. They have declared themselves our enemies. Protocol Omega is now justified. May humanity forgive what comes next. May God have mercy on those who have none." Draxon laughed at what he perceived as empty defiance. "Your protocols and your God mean nothing here, human. Commence decompression." The atmosphere began venting from the chamber. The process was agonizingly slow by design. Jaiwan felt her ears pop as pressure dropped. Her skin began to tingle, then burn. Breathing became difficult, then impossible. Her vision started to blur. In the detention chamber, Miho and Hyojin were screaming, fighting against their restraints. The other human delegates were in similar states of horror and rage. Veltharin guards watched with cold satisfaction. The last thing Jaiwan saw before consciousness faded was the stars. She thought of Earth, of her home and soul, of her sister's children she would never see grow up. She thought about humanity's dreams of joining the galactic community and how brutally those dreams had been murdered alongside her. Then, there was nothing. The council chamber was silent after it was over. Some species looked away in shame. Others, like the Veltharins, watched with satisfaction. The Luminary delegate was openly weeping, their light flickering with grief. "Justice has been served," Draxon announced. "Let the record show that the human ambassador was executed for crimes against the Galactic Council. Her delegation will be held as witnesses and return to Earth with our formal rejection of their petition for membership. Any future contact with humanity will be on our terms alone." Miho and Hyojin were eventually released and returned to their ship along with the other surviving delegation members. They were given Jaiwan's personal effects, including the uniform she had died in. The neural implant had been overlooked by the Veltharins, who didn't fully understand human technology. As their ship departed the station, Miho stood at the same observation deck where Jaiwan had stood just days earlier. The station was shrinking in the distance, and he felt nothing but cold rage. "They're going to pay for this," he said quietly. "Every single one of them." Hyojin stood beside him, her tears dried but her eyes hard. "Earth will have received everything through Jaiwan's implant. They know exactly what happened. They'll know about Protocol Omega." "Do you think Command will authorize it?" one of the other delegates asked. Miho thought about the images of Jaiwan's execution that had been broadcast across the galaxy. He thought about how the Veltharins had made a spectacle of murdering an unarmed diplomat. He thought about the message this sent to humanity about its place in the universe. "Yes," he said with absolute certainty. "They'll authorize it." Jaiwan gave them the justification with her last words. "The politicians and generals back home have been waiting for an excuse to show the galaxy what humanity can really do when pushed. The Veltharins just gave them that excuse." The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying the survivors back to Earth. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued its business as usual. The Veltharins celebrated their successful intimidation. Trade resumed. Diplomatic meetings proceeded. No one noticed the change yet. But, in the dark between the stars, in shipyards and military facilities across Earth's solar system, something was awakening. Humanity had reached out with an open hand and had that hand cut off. Now they would reach out again, but this time with a closed fist wrapped around weapons the galaxy had never imagined. Protocol Omega had been authorized. The countdown to vengeance had begun, and the Galactic Council had no idea what was coming for them. They had killed one human diplomat and thought they had taught humanity a lesson about power. They were about to learn a far more terrible lesson about what happens when you turn peace-seeking humans into an enemy. The Veltharans had wanted to make an example of Ambassador Jaiwan Park. They would get their wish, but not in the way they expected.
Jaiwan's death would indeed be an example, one that would echo across the galaxy for generations.
But the example would be about the price of murdering diplomats, not the rewards of brutality. The galaxy had made a fatal mistake. And it would soon learn just how fatal that mistake truly was. The human ship arrived at Earth 3 weeks after leaving the Galactic Council station. News of Ambassador Park's execution had reached humanity through her neural implant transmission within minutes of her death. By the time the survivors returned, Earth had already changed in ways the galaxy could not yet see. Captain Miho Choi and Dr. Hyojin Lee were immediately taken to Geneva, where the United Earth government had convened an emergency session. Every major nation's leaders were present, along with military commanders, intelligence directors, and scientific advisors. The chamber was filled with grim faces and barely controlled rage.
Miho delivered his report in a steady voice, though his hands shook as he described watching Jaiwan die.
Hyojin provided technical analysis of the Veltharan Empire's military capabilities based on what she had observed. Both emphasized the same conclusion: the Galactic Council was not a community of equals but an empire maintained through fear and violence.
They want us to be afraid, Miho told the assembled leaders.
They expect us to accept our place as subordinate species.
They think one execution will make us submit.
The Secretary General of the United Earth Government, an elderly woman named Salmon Han, sat in silence for a long moment after the briefing concluded.
Finally, she spoke. Ambassador Park's final words authorized Protocol Omega.
Before we proceed, I want every person in this room to understand what that means.
Protocol Omega is not a police action.
It is not a limited military strike. It is the complete mobilization of humanity's military and industrial capacity for the purpose of eliminating an existential threat.
Once authorized, it cannot be easily stopped.
The galaxy will see what we are truly capable of, for better or worse.
A general stood up. Madam Secretary, with respect, they executed our ambassador during a peaceful mission.
They broadcast it across the galaxy as entertainment.
If we don't respond with overwhelming force, every species out there will see us as weak. They'll think they can do whatever they want to humans.
I agree, Salmon said quietly.
Protocol Omega is authorized.
May history judge us by what we do with this power.
The vote was unanimous. Within hours, Earth went completely silent. Every communication channel to alien species shut down.
Human trade ships were recalled from the handful of alien ports they had visited.
Diplomatic messages went unanswered. Research stations along Earth's border with explored space were evacuated and abandoned.
To the Galactic Council, it looked like exactly what the Veltharans had intended: humanity retreating in fear and submission.
High Overseer Draxon received reports of Earth's silence with satisfaction.
The humans have learned their lesson, he told the Council.
They will trouble us no more. Let this be recorded as a successful enforcement of Council authority. The Veltharan Empire absorbed Earth's former trading partners and claimed the territories humanity had begun exploring.
They presented it as maintaining order in the wake of humanity's withdrawal. Most council members said nothing, intimidated by Veltharan military might.
But the Luminari were not satisfied.
Their science vessels had been monitoring human space with growing concern.
3 months after Jaiwan's execution, a Luminari astronomer named Kalen made a discovery that sent shockwaves through their scientific community.
There's a massive gravitational anomaly forming at the edge of Veltharan space, Kalen reported to the Luminari High Council.
The readings are unlike anything we've seen before. It's as if space itself is being distorted by enormous mass.
The Luminari dispatched a research vessel to investigate. What they found defied their understanding of human capabilities.
A fleet of human warships sat in perfect geometric formation at the boundary between human and Veltharan space.
But these were not the simple exploration vessels the Council had seen before. These were instruments of war, each one larger and more heavily armed than the biggest Veltharan battleships.
The fleet numbered in the hundreds. Sleek destroyers bristled with weapon systems.
Massive carriers held countless fighter craft.
Cruisers powered by drives that bent space itself into new configurations.
And, at the center of this armada was a dreadnought that dwarfed every other vessel, its hull black as night and covered in technology the Luminari couldn't identify.
The Luminari vessel was allowed to approach.
A communication channel opened, and a human face appeared on their screens. The human wore a military uniform decorated with symbols of high rank. "I am Admiral Tae-young Kim of the United Earth Space Forces," the human said in perfect Luminari language.
"You are from a peaceful species that opposed the execution of our ambassador. Therefore, we extend you courtesy. Relay this message to the Galactic Council." Admiral Kim's face hardened into an expression of cold determination. "You executed our envoy during a peaceful mission.
You broadcast her murder across the galaxy.
You thought this would make us submit. Instead, you declared war on humanity. We accept your declaration.
The Veltheran Empire will pay for its crimes, and any species that stands with them will share their fate."
The transmission ended. The Luminari vessel rushed back to Council space, carrying a warning that most members would not believe until it was too late. At the emergency council session, the Luminari delegation presented their findings. Holographic displays showed images of the human fleet, though the Luminari admitted their sensors could barely scan the advanced vessels. Draxon laughed dismissively. "The humans have built some ships. So what?
They are still a single-planet species playing at war. The Veltheran Empire spans 200 systems and commands fleets 1,000 times their size.
Let them come. We will crush them like we crushed their ambassador's defiance."
But not everyone shared his confidence.
A military analyst from the Krix species studied the images carefully. "High Overseer, I must point out several concerning details. The human ships use propulsion systems we don't recognize. Their energy signatures suggest power generation far beyond what we believe them capable of.
And this formation they've adopted, it's mathematically perfect in a way that suggests computer coordination beyond our own capabilities." "You're seeing phantoms," Draxon scoffed.
"The humans have had 3 months to prepare. They've built some new toys. It changes nothing." The Luminari delegate stood up, their light pulsing with urgency. "We need to consider negotiation. The humans lost their ambassador to our violence. Perhaps if we acknowledge the wrong done to them, punish those responsible, offer restitution, negotiation?"
Draxon's voice thundered through the chamber. "We negotiated nothing with them before, and we will negotiate nothing now. The Veltheran Empire does not show weakness, especially not to species that threaten us. If the humans want war, they will learn the same lesson thousands of other upstart species have learned: the Council's power is absolute." He turned to his military commanders.
"Mobilize the 3rd and 7th fleets. Send them to the human border.
Destroy their fleet and, then, proceed to their home system. Earth will be made an example that will last for 10,000 years."
The Veltheran fleets were indeed massive.
Over 2,000 warships of various classes began moving toward human space.
They were confident, experienced, and equipped with weapons proven in dozens of previous conflicts. To them, this was just another minor enforcement action. Admiral Kim watched the Veltheran fleet's approach on the holographic display aboard the UES Retribution.
Around him, his command staff monitored thousands of data streams, tracking every enemy vessel's position, speed, and weapon status. "They're coming straight at us," his tactical officer observed.
No attempt at subtlety or strategy. They think their numbers are enough.
"They don't understand what they're facing," Admiral Kim said quietly. He thought of Jaiwan, whom he had known personally. She had been his wife's best friend. Her execution had been personal for him, as it was for millions of humans who had watched her die. "Give me a fleet-wide channel," he ordered. When the channel opened, every human ship received his transmission simultaneously.
"All vessels, this is Admiral Kim. In a few hours, we will engage the Veltheran military forces responsible for murdering Ambassador Jaiwan Park. They come at us believing in their superiority.
They think humans are weak and afraid. Today, we teach them the error of that assumption.
Protocol Omega is in effect. Show them no mercy, because they showed our ambassador none. For Jaiwan. For Earth. For humanity. Across the fleet, thousands of crew members responded in unison, for humanity.
The Veltheran fleets arrived at the human border expecting to find the human ships attempting to flee or forming defensive positions.
Instead, they found the human fleet advancing directly toward them in that same perfect geometric formation. Veltheran Fleet Admiral Corinth couldn't believe what his sensors were showing. They're attacking? With those numbers? Have they lost their minds?
Incoming transmission from the human flagship, his communications officer reported.
Admiral Kim's face appeared on the screen. Veltheran forces, you are here to commit genocide against humanity. We will not allow this. Power down your weapons and withdraw, or be destroyed. This is your only warning. Corinth actually laughed. The human admiral offers us a warning. How precious. Target their flagship. All vessels, open fire. Let's end this quickly.
2,000 Veltheran ships opened fire simultaneously, launching enough destructive power to level a planet's surface. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space toward the human fleet. And then, the humans showed the galaxy what 3 months of preparation and Protocol Omega authorization had produced. Point defense systems activated across the human fleet with inhuman precision. Lasers moved at the speed of light, destroying incoming missiles. Energy shields flickered into existence, absorbing and dispersing beam weapons. Not a single shot reached its target. The Veltherans stared in disbelief for exactly 2 seconds. Then, the humans returned fire, and the galaxy learned to fear humanity. The human fleet's response was unlike anything the Veltheran forces had encountered in their thousands of years of military dominance. Where the Veltherans fired energy beams and conventional missiles, the humans unleashed weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics themselves. Railgun rounds accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, tore through Veltheran shields like they weren't there. The kinetic energy was so immense that when the round struck armor, entire ships simply disintegrated into clouds of superheated debris. In the first 30 seconds of engagement, over 100 Veltheran vessels were destroyed. Fleet Admiral Corinth watched his tactical display in growing horror as red symbols representing destroyed ships multiplied across the screen. Impossible. How can they generate that much power? Our shield should. His statement was cut off as a human weapon struck his flagship. The ship didn't explode. Instead, it seemed to age 1,000 years in an instant. Metal corroded, systems failed, and the hull crumbled to dust. The weapon was a localized time acceleration field, technology the Galactic Council had deemed theoretically possible but practically impossible to weaponize. Humanity had weaponized it. Corinth's last thought before his ship disintegrated was that his civilization had made a terrible mistake. Admiral Ken watched the battle unfold from the Retribution's command center. His expression remained calm, but inside he felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Target priority, command ships and carriers. I want their fleet leadership eliminated and their ability to launch fighters neutralized. The human fleet moved with perfect coordination, each ship executing maneuvers that would have been impossible without advanced artificial intelligence support. They weren't just fighting, they were demonstrating absolute technological superiority. A group of Veltheran fighters attempted to close with the human destroyers, hoping to exploit gaps in their defenses. Instead, they encountered something the galaxy had never seen before: autonomous attack drones, thousands of them, each one controlled by artificial intelligence and armed with micromissiles. The Veltheran fighters lasted less than a minute. Back at the Galactic Council station, species from across known space watched the battle in real time. The humans were broadcasting everything, just as the Veltherans had broadcast Jaiwan's execution. But this broadcast carried a very different message. "They're slaughtering the Veltheran fleets," a Krix representative whispered, their compound eyes wide with shock. 2,000 ships, and they're just cutting through them like they're nothing. The Luminari delegate, Kalen, watched with mixed emotions. They felt no joy in the violence, but they recognized justice being served. "We warned them.
We told them the humans were more dangerous than they appeared. The Veltharans' arrogance has brought this upon themselves. High Overseer Draxon stood frozen in the council chamber, watching his empire's military might being systematically dismantled. Send reinforcements. Mobilize every fleet we have. The humans cannot be allowed. It's already over, the Krix military analyst interrupted, their voice hollow. Look at the tactical display. The Veltharan fleets aren't just losing, they're being annihilated. In 15 minutes of combat, the humans have destroyed over half the Veltharan forces while suffering 0 losses. 0. Not one human ship has been destroyed or even damaged. The broadcast from Admiral Kim appeared on every screen in the council chamber. To the Galactic Council, you watched as the Veltharan Empire murdered our ambassador in cold blood. You did nothing. Your silence was complicity. Now witness the consequence of your cowardice. This is Protocol Omega, humanity's response to existential threats. We will eliminate the Veltharan Empire's ability to wage war, and we will do it in front of the entire galaxy so everyone understands the cost of attacking humanity. The battle lasted another 10 minutes. When it ended, 2,000 Veltharan ships had been reduced to debris fields drifting in space. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. But the humans were not finished. Not even close. Admiral Kim addressed his fleet again. Phase 1 complete. Commence Phase 2. All vessels, plot courses to designated Veltharan military installations. We're taking this war to their territory. Over the next 6 weeks, the galaxy watched in horror as humanity executed a military campaign of unprecedented precision and brutality. The human fleet split into dozens of task forces, each one targeting Veltharan military facilities across their empire. Veltharan military shipyards were destroyed by relativistic bombardment. Chunks of metal accelerated to near-light speed impacted orbital facilities with the force of nuclear weapons. The shipyards didn't just explode, they were erased from existence, leaving only expanding clouds of vaporized material. On colony worlds, nanomachine swarms were deployed against military targets. The nanomachines were programmed with inhuman precision. They disassembled Veltharan weapons, vehicles, and fortifications at the molecular level while leaving civilian infrastructure untouched. Veltharan soldiers watched in terror as their tanks and weapons simply fell apart into dust around them. The most terrifying weapon was something the humans called quantum-linked munitions. A single missile could be fired, and, through quantum entanglement, it would strike multiple targets simultaneously across light-years of space. Veltharan command centers across 20 different systems were destroyed in the same instant, their leadership eliminated before they could even understand what was happening. Captain Miho Choi had volunteered to serve aboard one of the human cruisers participating in the campaign. He stood on the bridge as his ship approached a Veltharan military base on the planet Thoraxis. The base had been built into a mountain, supposedly impregnable. Target acquired, the weapons officer reported. Orbital bombardment ready. Make it count, Miho said quietly. That base trained the soldiers who guarded Jaiwan during her execution. The ship fired a single projectile. It struck the mountain with such force that the entire geological formation collapsed inward, creating a crater 20 kilometers wide. The base and everyone in it simply ceased to exist. Miho felt no satisfaction, only a cold sense that some small measure of justice had been served. Next target, he ordered. Dr. Hyojin Lee was not aboard a warship. She had returned to Earth where she worked with the Intelligence Division, analyzing Veltharan communications and predicting their strategic responses. What she found disturbed her greatly. They still don't understand, she told her commanding officer. The Veltharan leadership thinks this is a conventional war they can win through attrition. They're mobilizing more fleets, calling up reserves, preparing for a long campaign. They don't realize that humanity isn't interested in occupation or conquest. We're interested in elimination. The officer nodded grimly. Admiral Kim's orders are clear. Destroy their ability to wage war, period. No half measures. No negotiated settlements. Protocol Omega specifies complete neutralization of the threat.
The Galactic Council attempted to intervene. Diplomatic messages flooded human communication channels, demanding ceasefires, calling for negotiations, and threatening sanctions.
The humans ignored all of it.
Finally, a coalition of moderate species led by the Luminari managed to establish direct contact with Admiral Kim. The Admiral appeared on their screens, looking older and more tired than he had at the campaign's beginning.
Admiral Kim, the Luminari delegate, said carefully, "We understand your anger.
We acknowledge the terrible wrong done to Ambassador Park. But this campaign of destruction must end.
You've proven your point. The Veltharans have been humbled.
Please, before more lives are lost, consider
what?" Admiral Kim interrupted, his voice sharp.
The Veltharans executed our ambassador and broadcast her murder as entertainment. They showed her no mercy. They gave her no trial, no chance to defend herself. They killed her to make an example.
So now we make an example of them.
But you're destroying their entire civilization, the Luminari protested.
Millions of Veltharans have died. How many more must die before your vengeance is satisfied?
Admiral Kim's expression hardened.
This isn't vengeance. This is a military operation to eliminate a threat. When you execute diplomats, you declare that diplomacy is worthless.
You declare that only force matters.
Fine. We're showing the galaxy exactly how much force humanity can bring to bear.
When we're done, no species will ever think about murdering our representatives again. He paused, then continued in a quieter but more intense tone.
And, let's be clear about something. We're targeting military assets exclusively. We've gone to extraordinary lengths to minimize civilian casualties. Our weapons are more precise than anything you've ever seen.
Every Veltharan civilian death in this campaign has been because their military used civilians as shields. Don't lecture us about proportionality when we're holding ourselves to higher standards than the species who started this war by murdering an unarmed woman.
The transmission ended. The Luminari sat in silence, recognizing the truth in the Admiral's words.
The humans were being ruthless, but they were not being indiscriminate.
Every target was military. Every strike was precise.
In some terrible way, Protocol Omega represented warfare at its most clinical and least cruel, even as it demonstrated unprecedented destructive power. After 8 weeks of continuous operations, the Veltharan Empire was effectively finished as a military power. Their fleets were destroyed. Their shipyards were rubble. Their command structure was shattered. Veltharan civilian government representatives sent desperate pleas for mercy, though the military leadership remained defiant.
The Galactic Council convened yet another emergency session. This time, even the Veltharan's former allies were demanding action.
The chamber was filled with angry voices and recriminations. The humans must be stopped, a representative from a Veltharan client state insisted.
They've gone too far. This is genocide. It's not genocide, the Luminari countered. It's systematic military defeat.
The humans have been extraordinarily careful to target only military assets. Veltharan civilian casualties have been a fraction of what any other species would have inflicted in a similar campaign.
That doesn't matter, another delegate shouted. They're too powerful. If they can do this to the Veltharans, they can do it to any of us.
They must be controlled, contained, or destroyed. That was when Admiral Kim's transmission appeared on every screen in the chamber, as well as on every communication device in Council space. The Admiral had clearly timed his message for maximum impact.
To the Galactic Council, he began.
For 2 months, you've watched humanity wage war against the Veltharan Empire. You've seen our weapons.
You've witnessed our capabilities.
Now you speak of containing us, controlling us, or destroying us. Some of you learned nothing from the Veltharan's mistake. The Admiral stood up, and the camera pulled back to show he was no longer on his ship. He was on Velthara Prime itself, the Veltharan homeworld, standing in the ruins of their primary military command center.
We are here.
We are in the heart of Veltharan space, on their homeworld, in their most secure facility.
We bypassed every defense they had.
and were broadcasting this message using their own communication systems.
We could destroy this planet. We could render it lifeless. We have weapons you cannot even imagine. But we won't.
Because we're not conquerors and we're not murderers.
He paused, letting that sink in. The Veltheran Empire executed our ambassador because they thought strength meant brutality. They were wrong. True strength is the power to destroy coupled with the wisdom not to.
We've broken their military because they threatened us. Now we offer them, and all of you, a choice. Admiral Tae-young Kim stood in the ruins of the Veltheran Command Center, surrounded by the rubble of what had once been the most secure military facility in the Empire.
Human soldiers secured the perimeter while engineers worked to maintain the communication broadcast. The Admiral wanted every species in the galaxy to see this moment clearly.
We came to you in peace, Admiral Kim continued, his voice steady and clear.
Ambassador Jaimun Park extended her hand in friendship.
You responded by murdering her. You thought her death would intimidate us.
Instead, you taught us that the galaxy respects only strength. Very well. We have shown you our strength. Now we will show you our terms.
He gestured, and holographic displays appeared throughout the council chamber and on screens across civilized space. The documents shown were detailed and comprehensive, clearly the work of months of preparation. This is the Galactic Charter of Diplomatic Rights and Protections, Admiral Kim explained. It establishes absolute immunity for all diplomatic personnel during official missions. It creates a neutral peacekeeping force drawn from multiple species to enforce these protections.
It mandates arbitration for disputes between civilizations. And it specifies severe consequences for any violation of diplomatic immunity.
A Veltheran council member, one of the few military leaders who had survived the campaign, spoke up via remote connection. His voice shook with barely controlled rage.
You think you can dictate terms to the entire galaxy? You're one species. We are hundreds. Your arrogance exceeds even your military might.
Admiral Kim turned to face the camera directly.
You still don't understand. This isn't arrogance. This is a lesson being taught in the only language you seem to understand. Let me be absolutely clear about humanity's position. He nodded to someone off-screen. Throughout Veltheran space, human ships simultaneously activated their weapons systems.
Not to fire, but to demonstrate readiness. Every remaining Veltheran military installation, every government building, every strategic asset suddenly found itself painted by human targeting systems.
We don't need to occupy your worlds. We don't need to garrison troops in your cities. We have weapons that can strike any target in your empire from light years away. We have surveillance systems that track every ship you launch. We have technology you cannot counter. But we don't want to use any of it. We want peace.
Real peace, not the peace of submission you tried to force on us. In the council chamber, delegates shifted uncomfortably.
Some looked angry, others frightened, a few thoughtful.
The luminary delegates stood up, their light pulsing in a pattern that indicated careful consideration. Admiral Kim, your charter includes provisions for a peacekeeping force and arbitration systems.
This suggests you're not simply seeking revenge or domination. Can you elaborate on your vision for galactic governance? Admiral Kim's expression softened slightly. Thank you for asking, Delegate Kalen. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We want to be part of a true community of equals. But we've learned that such a community cannot exist when stronger species can murder the representatives of weaker ones without consequence. He pulled up another section of the charter. The peacekeeping force would be multi-species, with no single civilization having majority control. Its sole purpose would be protecting diplomatic personnel and investigating violations. The arbitration system would provide a peaceful way to resolve disputes before they escalate to violence. And the consequences for violations would be enforced collectively, not by any single power. And if we refuse to accept these terms, another delegate challenged. Admiral Kim's face hardened again. Then, you declare that you want a galaxy where might makes right,
where diplomats can be murdered, and where the strong prey on the weak.
If that's the galaxy you want, then humanity will remain armed and vigilant.
We will enforce these principles ourselves if we must.
But that would be a tragedy for everyone.
He paused, looking directly into the camera.
Let me tell you what Protocol Omega really is. It's not just a military doctrine. It's a promise. A promise that if you threaten humanity's existence, we will respond with everything we have.
But it's also a safeguard, a way to ensure our survival in a hostile universe.
We hoped we'd never need it. You proved we were right to prepare it.
Captain Miho Choi and Dr. Hyojin Lee had been brought to Velthora Prime for this moment. They stood beside Admiral Kim now, both wearing their diplomatic uniforms rather than military attire.
Miho held a carefully preserved item, Ambassador Jaiwon Park's diplomatic sash, recovered from the airlock where she died.
These are Captain Choi and Dr. Lee, Admiral Kim introduced them. They were forced to watch Ambassador Park's execution. They bore witness to your brutality. Now they will bear witness to what we hope will be a new beginning. Hyojin stepped forward, her voice emotional but controlled.
Jaiwon was my friend.
She believed in peace and cooperation. She died for those beliefs. The worst thing we could do would be to abandon those beliefs because of her death. The best way to honor her is to build the galaxy she imagined, one where diplomacy matters and where all species can meet as equals.
Miho added, but we also honor her by ensuring no other ambassador ever suffers her fate.
The galaxy must choose, accept these protections and work toward real peace, or continue on the path of violence and domination.
We're done being victims. We're also done being silent about injustice. The transmission shifted to show a new location.
Human construction crews were working on something massive in orbit of Velthora Prime.
The structure was taking shape rapidly, its architecture blending human and alien design elements.
This will be the Ambassador Jaiwon Park Memorial Station, Admiral Kim explained. It will serve as humanity's permanent embassy to the Galactic Council. It will also house the headquarters of the new peacekeeping force and arbitration system if the galaxy accepts our charter. We're building it here, on the site where Ambassador Park was murdered, as a reminder of the cost of brutality and the value of peace.
Over the next week, the Galactic Council engaged in the most intense debate in its history.
Species argued, negotiated, and wrestled with the reality of their situation. The Velthorans were broken and had no choice but to accept. But the other species had to decide whether to embrace humanity's vision or resist it. The Luminari were the first to formally accept the charter. Their delegate gave an impassioned speech about the need for genuine reform in galactic governance.
We have grown complacent, Kalen admitted. We allowed the strong to dominate the weak because it was convenient. We watched an innocent diplomat die and did nothing because we were afraid.
The humans have shown us the consequences of our cowardice. They've also offered us a path forward.
I vote to accept. One by one, other species joined.
Some did so reluctantly, clearly motivated by fear of human military might.
Others seemed genuinely convinced by the Charter's principles.
A few remained opposed, but they were increasingly isolated.
The final vote was called 30 days after Admiral Kim's broadcast. The Charter passed with an overwhelming majority.
The Galactic Council, in essence, agreed to transform itself from an imperial power structure into something closer to what humanity had originally hoped to find, a true community of nations. The ceremony establishing the new order was held at the nearly completed Memorial Station. Representatives from every council species attended, along with a large human delegation. Dr. Hyojin Lee had been appointed Earth's new chief ambassador, a choice that symbolized humanity's continued commitment to diplomacy despite everything that had happened. Hyojin stood at the memorial wall where Jaiwon's name was inscribed in 100 different languages. Beside it were the names of diplomatic personnel from other species who had been killed in the line of duty over the centuries. The wall was far longer than anyone had expected, a sobering reminder of how common such violence had been. We dedicate this station to Ambassador Jaiwon Park and to all those who sought peace and died for it, Hyojin said, her voice carrying through the station and across the galaxy via broadcast. may their sacrifice ensure that future generations can meet in safety, speak in honesty, and work together for the common good. She paused, looking at the assembled delegates. Humanity came to the stars hoping to find friends.
We found enemies instead.
But we also found potential allies like the Luminari who spoke for justice even when it was dangerous. We found civilizations who want something better than endless cycles of domination and submission.
Protocol Omega will remain active, Hyojin continued, and many delegates shifted nervously.
We will maintain our military readiness.
We will continue developing our defensive capabilities.
But we pray we never need to use them again.
The choice is yours.
Attack us or threaten us, and you'll face the same fate as the Veltherin military. Work with us in good faith, and you'll find humanity to be the loyal friends and allies we always wanted to be. Admiral Kim stood nearby, no longer in combat uniform but in formal diplomatic attire. He had been asked to serve as the first commander of the multi-species peacekeeping force, a role he accepted with the condition that command would rotate among species every 5 years. "We didn't want this war," the admiral said when it was his turn to speak. "Every human death, every Veltherin death, every moment of suffering in this conflict could have been avoided if Ambassador Park had been treated with the respect she deserved. But, since the war happened, we had to fight it in a way that would prevent future wars. Not through cruelty, but through overwhelming demonstration that attacking humanity is too costly to ever be worth attempting." He looked directly at the former Veltherin delegates.
"Your empire thought strength meant the ability to inflict suffering. You were wrong.
Strength is the ability to protect what you value and the wisdom to know when violence is necessary and when it isn't.
Humanity mastered war so completely because we want peace. We became the galaxy's most dangerous species so we could be safe enough to be its kindest."
Captain Miho Choi attended the ceremony but did not speak. He stood at attention throughout, honoring his friend and the principles she died for. Afterward, he returned to Earth where he would help train the next generation of human diplomats and their security details.
The lessons learned from Jaiwan's death would never be forgotten.
The Veltherin Empire entered a period of rebuilding under international supervision.
Human technology was shared to help reconstruct their civilian infrastructure, though their military capabilities remained restricted by treaty.
Some Veltherins remained bitter, but many began to recognize that the old imperial system had brought them nothing but destruction. High Overseer Draxon had died during the campaign, killed when a human strike destroyed his command bunker. His replacement was a civilian administrator who had opposed the execution from the beginning. This new leader worked closely with the peacekeeping force to ensure Veltherin compliance with the charter.
1 year after Jaiwan's death, the memorial station was fully operational.
It had become a hub of galactic diplomacy, a place where species met on genuinely equal terms for the first time in recorded history. Human technology had been selectively shared with allied species, advancing the galactic community's capabilities while ensuring humanity maintained its edge. Dr. Hyojin Lee walked through the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars. She thought about Jaiwan often, wondering what her friend would think of everything that had happened.
Would she approve of the violence that had been done in her name? Would she be proud of the peace that violence had made possible?
A Luminary delegate approached her, Kalen, who had become something of a friend.
"Ambassador Lee, you seem troubled." Hyojin nodded. "I wonder sometimes if we did the right thing. We killed so many Veltherins. Changed the galaxy through force. Jaiwan wanted peace, and we brought war."
Kalen's light pulsed thoughtfully.
"You brought justice. And, through justice, you made real peace possible.
The old system was built on fear and submission. It was never really peaceful, just quiet. What you built here, this charter, these protections, this is actual peace. Built on mutual respect and enforced by collective will."
Ambassador Park would understand that sometimes you must fight for the ability to stop fighting. Hyojin smiled sadly.
"I hope you're right." She turned back to the observation deck, watching as ships from a dozen different species docked at the station. Diplomats, traders, scientists, all coming together in a way that would have been impossible before humanity's intervention. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Humanity had proven themselves to be exactly what they had always claimed, a species that desired peace but possessed the capability for terrible war. The name Earth now carried weight throughout known space.
It meant both friendship offered freely and retribution delivered absolutely. Protocol Omega remained active, a promise and a threat.
Humanity's fleets patrolled the borders of their space, advanced weapons ready but unused. The galaxy had a choice to make every single day: work with humanity in building a better civilization, or test whether they were truly as dangerous as they appeared to be. So far, no one had been foolish enough to test them again. The Ambassador Jaimun Park Memorial Station orbited Velthera Prime, a permanent reminder of the cost of diplomacy done wrong and the price of making peace through strength. In its halls, the future of galactic civilization was being debated and determined, not by the strongest or the most brutal, but by representatives meeting as equals under protections that humanity had bought with blood and technology.
It wasn't the peaceful first contact humanity had hoped for.
But it was the peace humanity had earned, and it would endure for as long as they had the strength and will to maintain it. Jaimun's dream of galactic cooperation had come true, just not in the way she had imagined. Sometimes peace required the credible threat of war. Sometimes the only way to end violence was to demonstrate such overwhelming capability for it that no one dared start it again. Humanity had learned these lessons from its own bloody history, and now they had taught them to the stars. The galaxy would remember Ambassador Jaimun Park not as a victim, but as the catalyst for transformation. Her death had been tragic, but it had not been meaningless. In the station bearing her name, in the charter protecting all diplomats, in the peace that now held across hundreds of worlds, her legacy lived on. And, somewhere in the darkness between stars, human ships maintained their vigil, ensuring that her sacrifice and the sacrifice of all those who came after would never need to be repeated.
Protocol Omega stood ready, a sleeping giant that everyone hoped would never need to wake again.